It's just, they make the recommendation to the board and then the board, adopt.
Hey, Bill.
Sorry, I left actually really early.
I think it was the only question I would have to.
Traffic and made bad choices for alternative routes.
What happens?
Ran into a dead end.
So then, like, this all supposedly has gone through the bylaw, that's the TAC rather.
These are. We're bringing them to you first.
This is,
Questions, then we'll have.
we got quorum now, right?
Yeah.
Go to.
Or do we not have quorum? We haven't changed the bylaws.
Is there anyone else online though, right? Because we only need one seat.
He is online, but we just got to see him.
Okay. Oh, my day.
Can you all hear me at your end? This is Mike Riley.
Hey, Mike.
Are we ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Councilor Ariel Mendez, and we now convene the Bend Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board meeting for May 16th, 2025. Let's begin with a round of introductions, starting on my right. Omar?
Yep. Hey, everyone. Omar Ahmed, Central Oregon and Lower John Day Area Manager with ODOT. Bob Townsend, Cascades East Transit Director.
Bill Chang, Deschutes County Commissioner.
Jane Appley, Bend MPO Senior Planner.
Kelly Kennedy, Bend MPO staff.
Tyler Diekey, Bend MPO staff.
And Tyler, would you mind reading off our participants who are online?
Online, I see Counselor Mike Riley,
Yep.
and I see James Rofi, who is one of our community members on the Technical Advisory Committee. Is that all, Kelly?
Okay, thank you, Tyler. Item 2 is hybrid meeting guidelines. This is also you, Tyler.
All right, this meeting's being recorded and small group. I mean, normally we ask folks to raise their hand if they have questions. Counselor Riley, you can feel free to butt in as we move through the process.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Mike, can you hear us okay?
Yep, I can hear you great.
Okay, great, thank you. Item 3 is public comment. Is anyone present for public comment? Okay, seeing none, then moving on to item 4, which is approval of the previous meeting minutes. We have 2 to approve here.
Missed them both.
What's that?
Missed them both. Sorry.
Okay,
So
would anyone
Yeah.
else like to make a motion?
I move approval of the March 26, 25 Budget Committee draft meeting minutes and the April 18, 25 Policy Board draft minutes as presented.
Second.
A motion has been made by Mr. Ahmed and seconded by Councilor Riley. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
And so motion passes with Commissioner Chang abstaining. Moving on to item 5, Policy Board Bylaws Amendments. Tyler?
All right. I'm going to jump first into the Technical Advisory Committee bylaws because I think those are simpler and we can get through those pretty quickly. And you should have a hard copy. Do you have a Commissioner? So Technical Advisory Committee bylaws proposing just some fairly minor changes. The first being these bylaws are quite old. I mean, they're 20 years old and we want to change. We've been in some of our planning documents, we're changing the word citizen to instead of citizen members, we're changing it to community members to be more inclusive. We're recommending that change in the bylaws. We added language on page 3 of the bylaws based on discussions in the past about the board giving preference to community members who serve both on the TAC and the budget committee member, or is both on the budget committee and the TAC. So we have that overlap. And then the only potentially larger change that I wanted to discuss with you is right now we have, if you look on page 2, we have our list of our TAC members. Central Oregon Community College has been a member for quite a while, and their status, given their staffing issues, they have not been able to provide a representative for the last year. It's been quite some time. And I've reached out to the member that they have assigned, and he said he'd be comfortable having his membership status changed, to either being a non-voting member, and if he would try to engage if there were issues specific to COCC. So I think our recommendation would be that that position move to become a non-voting member.
Do you want to pause and see if there's support for that before moving on to any other items, or?
Yeah.
Is that any thoughts or comments from board members?
That's me.
So moving the COCC membership from full member to non-voting member, correct?
On the TAC.
On
What's
the
that?
TAC. Yeah.
On the,
Seeing no objection, I think that's
Okay.
probably fine.
So you're just gonna add the words non-voting after their name in the list there on page 3 or whatever it is,
Yes.
Article 4.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the last change on the last page, the amendment process as it was written was a little strange, I would say. And so the staff, we're recommending, we are rewriting the amendment process and recommending that the technical advisory committee, they review proposed changes and they make a recommendation up to the board, and the board ultimately approves any changes. In the past, or the existing bylaws say that the TAC approves their own bylaws, and that the policy board, the only role the policy board would have would be to vote on a change in membership. And so we're saying that you would, as a board, would approve any and all changes to the bylaws.
So I do have a question on this, and that general approach is fine to me. It seemed to me like paragraph C is really kind of unnecessary and redundant to paragraph B. So I had a suggested change to paragraph B, just try to simplify this a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a thought on that as well. I almost wondered whether we could just eliminate paragraph B, C, and D and amend paragraph A to say the bylaws may be amended at any regular meeting of the Bend MPO Policy Board with the input of the TAC, and then provided that written notice of and so on. I mean, I guess the order there would be a little bit hard, because if we're providing written notice, where's the opportunity for the input? I mean, I think the general idea that we're trying to capture is policy board should be the one to make amendments to the TAC bylaws, but the policy board would like to invite the input of the TAC members in that process. Does that sound like a good approach? So I think
That
we
makes
want the input,
Yeah.
but it's the advice from the technical advisory committee is intended to serve the policy board. So any thoughts on the order? I mean, we provide notice.
Well, right here, you're actually amending the bylaws to the TAC itself, not to what so I don't know if that goes in the bylaws for the policy board itself. So I think paragraph A is basically saying that the TAC can consider amendments, and then paragraph B needs to give it a decision rule. There's no decision rule if you just do paragraph A, Counselor Mendez. So I would tend to leave paragraph B in there because it gives a decision-making rule, the majority vote part.
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, that's missing in the current draft, but that was my suggestion, is to essentially get rid of paragraph C and just add a few words to paragraph B. So there's a clear decision-making rule on what they're recommending to the policy board. So what I was suggesting is that the first sentence in paragraph A, well, the only sentence, be amended to say, regarding adoption of the amended bylaws by a majority vote, comma, with or without modifications to the proposal.
Amended by the policy board and not TAC.
Well, these are the TAC bylaws, and we're telling the TAC that it can consider amendments to its bylaws. And we're saying, if you're going to do that, that's fine. Talk about them, decide what the amendments are by a majority vote, and then send that on to the policy board.
I see what you're saying. Okay. And so then it would be eliminate.
Like paragraph.
Just eliminate paragraph C, and then the one sentence in paragraph B, where it says adoption of the amended bylaws, add the words by majority vote, and then with or without modifications, and then add to the proposal is what I wrote down. But
I think that sounds good. Does anyone else have thoughts?
Agree with where Counselor Riley's going on that.
I like the intent of what you were describing, and I like the specifics that Mike is suggesting.
The only other question,
Yeah, I think Mike was saying, or Councilor Riley was saying, by majority vote. With
Yeah.
the policy board, for the policy
yeah,
board
for
adopting
line
the
for D,
amended.
yeah.
Um,
Do we want to keep it? Right now it says unanimous.
yeah,
Do we want to, I know we had that discussion recently, I mean, at the last meeting or two.
with respect to the policy board's bylaws. But
Yeah, and the
not
IGA,
for-
modifying the IGA,
Right.
was that discussion?
And I think we ended up with unanimity for both of those. And the question would be whether unanimity is appropriate for the technical advisory committee bylaws. My own sense is it's probably unnecessary. But open to hearing thoughts from others.
Did we land on unanimous for the policy board, or just like a super
For the IGA, but not the bylaw.
for the IGA, but not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
thank
what
you.
it was.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
I would tend to agree that I think unanimous high bar for TAC.
Yeah, I don't see what that's trying to guard against, so.
Simple majority or?
I think simple majority sounds like a good proposal.
Okay.
Anything else on the TAC bylaws?
No.
I just want to be sure that I have notes correct. Were we changing anything to A under sections?
No, Councilor Riley, I don't believe we were making any changes to A. Is that right?
Give me just a second here.
Sorry, what did he say?
He said he's gonna pull them up again.
Oh, okay.
Correct. Yeah, I wasn't proposing any changes to section A.
Right.
I was proposing we delete section C, that whole paragraph. And that we add those few words that I suggested. So make a recommendation to the Bend MPO policy board regarding the adoption of the amended bylaws by majority vote. So it's meant to give a decision rule to the TAC. And then with or without modifications to the proposal. Maybe those 3 words aren't needed, but
For item D, are we keeping that with a change to from unanimous to simple majority, or are we eliminating that?
yes, please, simple majority.
Thank you.
And I think in terms of process, I mean, we should take these back because we haven't reviewed these proposed changes with the TAC.
Right.
So we should take these to the TAC at their next meeting and then we can bring them back to you for formal approval next month.
It'll be interesting if they reject our proposed amendments to their bylaws because their current bylaws entitle them to.
Right.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Kelly.
All right, are we good with the proposed change, the changes as discussed then? We can take to the TAC next month?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
I will jump then into the policy bylaw changes.
Sounds good.
These are much more meaty. There's a lot of potential changes in there. So just recalling for everyone, and I think Commissioner Chang was here. Bob Townsend was here. We actually started, I have up on the slide here that we started this discussion in fall of 24. We actually had some preliminary discussions back in 2022, I think, about bylaws changes, and then we take it for a number of reasons. So bylaw changes have been in motion off and on now for over 2 years. So based on the discussions we've had in the past, the changes that the board had supported were CET as a voting member to the board. The CET director would serve as the representative to the policy board, reducing the number of City of Bend members from 3 to 2. Each member would get their own vote, so it'd be a 5 vote. There'd be 5 votes on the table, and then there were some other just small kind of editing changes that the board had reviewed. Other items discussed that I don't recall that we landed on were quorum requirements to hold a meeting. We had discussed, I think at a prior meeting, whether 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 would constitute a quorum. So I wanted to get direction on that today. There's some language in there about member alternates. Voting, we discussed whether a simple majority or a supermajority would be required to approve an action. Adding TAC members as ex officio members to the policy board. There's some language in there we're still waiting. I'm still working with the city on regarding my role with MPO manager role in relationship to the policy board. And then we added a sentence in there that allows the chair to allow non-board members to speak during meetings. And so if you want, I'm just wondering how it'd be easiest. Do we want to just go through this page by page and look at the changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a good idea. We've talked about a lot of these before, and some of these will be longer discussions than others, but I think that's probably a good idea.
Could we go back 1 slide, please, first, though? So is everybody in agreement on these changes, 1 and 2? Are these changes reflected? These changes, I believe, are reflected in the proposed amendments, correct, Tyler?
Correct, yes. And we discussed, these changes were discussed, I think, before you were on board.
Yeah, and that's all, they're all fine to me. I'm just asking that question before we move on to the next other stuff.
Yeah. So I'm gonna stop sharing this and just pull up, so page 1 is there's very minimal here. These are mostly just word changes. So I don't think there's anything to discuss on page 1. Yes, it's shortening, it's using BMPO consistently, that type of thing throughout the document.
Mhm.
Shortening a few sentences. Page 2. The only real change at the very top of page 2. The existing bylaws reference the 2000 census as being the basis for the MPO boundary. Our boundary gets up every time after the decennial census is conducted, we get updated boundary information from the Census Bureau. So we just made that generic and just said from the census, and as the city amends its UGB, for instance, we would incorporate those changes into our boundary. Article 3 is membership, terms of office, officers and voting. So there we're adding the CET language, adding them as a voting member, providing the city of Bend that each member actually gets their own vote. And then under Article 3, sub-item C, that's where the majority language that we discussed in the past, and I don't think the policy board landed on whether they wanted, a simple majority or a super majority to approve any action. So I think we can stop there and discuss that item first.
Historically, this body has been consensus oriented, and it's, the time when that wasn't the case predates my service on this board.
Me too. That said, maybe it would be helpful to get a little historical perspective from Tyler on times when there was significantly split votes on and what kind of issues the MPO was dealing with. So that,
I mean, I think going way back, more than 10 years ago, I would say there was some tension between the city and ODOT especially.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of discussion with boards back at that time about concern about, well, there was concern on different concern from different members on different issues. So there was kind of this tension between the city and ODOT. And we ended up with the voting structure we had where the city had 3 members, but only 1 vote. Because there was concern back at that time that if they had 3 votes, the county had 1 and ODOT had 1. There was concern from both county and ODOT about the city reps just simply being able to outvote the county or ODOT on any vote. It'd just be a 3-2 vote type votes. The city would be able to dominate the MPO policy. And so I think we have that simple majority in there. It's in there now with this. That's based on the city only having 1 combined vote. And so that made it so that the city could never dominate. And I think the question now is, as we move from a 3-vote structure to 5 votes, do you want to have, keep it maintained? I don't know if I answered your question, Commissioner Chang, kind of rambling a little bit, but whether a simple majority is sufficient now that the city will only have 2 members, or if you want to go with super majority, like requiring 4 out of 5 members to approve an action.
I think the 2 other items that I would add to that are, one, there's a presumption that members representing the city would necessarily be aligned, and I don't know that that's a safe assumption. And then the other question would be, if we did super majority rather than simple majority, it would mean that if you assumed alignment among the city of Bend representatives, the city of Bend representatives would be able to stop any action by voting against it. So I can't get away from seeing it as are we more worried about inaction? Like, what are the consequences of this board being frozen and unable to, for example, approve an amendment to the MTIP? Or are we more worried about a failure to take action, or are we more worried about being able to take action? And I tend to think, I would say it's more, it's a hard issue. I'm tempted to say I lean towards taking action, which means simple majority. But if you're worried about preventing a bad decision, then you probably want super majority. Bob, you've had a long career on this board.
I mean, if it's okay to jump in on this, then I think, especially when we're deciding funding and things, right, to your point, is action is important, simple majority right? It seems to make sense, especially in the case, and it's not that now with you and Mike, obviously, but these cycles change and, as we try to, let's say we wanted funding for something in Deschutes River Woods outside the city and the city was opposed to it, it could be held, forever. And then other people wouldn't vote on it, and it would just create a animosity versus, hey, we still want to get buy-in, but no one party can control everything. I like the simple majority. I mean, this is past experience. Tyler mentioned it. There was certainly, as different money as came through, there was this different, there's a lot of conflicts of interest with, and it'll be that same way with me where CET will come in and propose on money. So I'll have to abstain actually, on that, or if city's proposing certain things or county. And so I like the simple majority of those who can vote. Because there's just too many past history too of, of things where it was very complicated. And as Tyler mentioned, that's why I went 3-1 vote. So technically back then you had to get, 2 of the 3, right? So it was pretty good. And now you'd have to get 3 of the 5, which is a pretty good representation of transportation in Central Oregon. So that would be my comment on it.
Are there any changes to quorum? Tyler, or I guess I'd more, but
That's,
that'd be like my only other concern.
Yeah, I don't really, where's the quorum defined?
it's on,
Oh, it's Article 4. 4 of the 5 voting members.
Right, because what you're saying is if
We're missing one, now it's unanimous.
Right, but remember that the decision-making rule we're talking about right now in paragraph Article 3C, this has to be a simple majority of the voting members. It's not the people present at the meeting, it's the voting members. So to take action always requires 3 votes of the voting members minimum. So the city can never either block or reject, regardless of the number of people in the room. Because there has to be 3, there has to be, it's the voting members. It's not the quorum of the meeting.
Yeah, I think that addresses my concern in a kind of a different way, right? Like, because I was reading it the same way, right? And so if we were a super majority, then it would require everybody in the room if we're missing one to get there.
Yeah, right.
So I think where I'm landing is simple majority makes sense.
any thoughts, Commissioner Chang?
The scenario I'm trying to go through in my head is a difficult county commissioner and insulating you all from that potential disruption. And I don't have a problem with simple majority. I think simple majority is fine.
Right, I mean, it would depend on what the nature of the action was. But, yeah, Councilor Riley, any thoughts on this?
I agree on the simple majority. I mean, the quorum section also suggests that no business can be conducted unless you have at least 4 of the 5 voting members present. So you can't even hold a vote if you don't have 4 of the 5. So if you had 3 people show up, that group by themselves can't act, according to paragraph C in the Article 4.
So
we can change that as well. I mean, when we get.
If 2 members were really opposed, they could just simply deny quorum. And then
Right.
no action could take place.
Right.
That's a pretty high bar as well, but. You're not calling from Idaho right now, are you, Mike? No, I'm kidding. Okay, well, it sounds like we're
I have a
laying.
motion I want to propose that we join the state of Idaho.
Could I ask one question about kind of the way that the dynamic of the Bend City councilors when, if the MP policy board is going to be making a decision about something really, really, really big or contentious for the city, would the two counselors who participate on the policy board consult the full council? Or are you each showing up as an individual decision maker to deliberate?
Well, my impression has been, we are appointed as independent representatives and that there is not a duty to consult ahead of time, but there is a duty to inform. I don't believe that we have a mechanism for recalling us if before our term, for example. But I think we are appointed by the mayor and do try to keep council apprised of our decisions. And I think if there was a significantly high profile issue that this policy board considered, I think we would have probably I don't think we would be required to, but I would feel it would be appropriate to inform and involve council in that conversation and as much ahead of time as we could. But I don't think that we're serving as representatives of council who have deliberated ahead of time on any of these issues. If that answers your questions. Councilor Riley, you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I don't, not my understanding, we're obliged to like have the council come up with a majority decision that then directs how we vote.
Mhm.
But I think we probably want to consult them if there's something that we think is pretty controversial. I don't know. No, there's no rules about that. It's kind of a wild, wild west.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I would, just understanding kind of your philosophy on it is helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'll like the example I'll go back to is the MPO the MPO boundary. When we were talking about Tumalo, I wanted the other two commissioners' eyes very wide open to understand what was being discussed and what the options were. Doesn't mean I would have agreed with them if they had taken a strong position. And they didn't. I mean, they basically deferred to me. Well, by not having an opinion, they deferred to me. But that just kind of, and I'm not talking about putting that into policy, into bylaws, but just kind of in terms of philosophy, feeling like you can show up and represent your jurisdictions. That was, that it just occurred to me that is somewhat has some relevance to this discussion about super majorities and quorum.
No, I think the point, if there was an issue where the governing body, the other members were, opposed to something and the representative here supported it, or if it was the other way around, I don't know that there would be a formal mechanism to address that. But I think it's possible. It hasn't happened during my tenure.
Yeah. I mean, one other controversial issue I'd bring up was the paved bike path, running out of Bend and Deschutes River Woods to Lavalanche Visitor Center. I know that one of the other commissioners really is just quite opposed to that. And if I felt like two of the three were strongly opposed to that, then I would have to, definitely share that with the MPO. I still might vote the way that I see fit, but
the examples of that in the past are like major ODOT projects within the MPO boundary require an IGA with the city of Bend. And so the city of council has to vote on them. And then it comes to MPO STIP approval. So it's, you know, a de
It's already been
facto on
pre-
complex, like it would be very awkward for the council to approve an IGA agreeing to a project and then it comes here and then we say no, but those, you know, and the county is the same way if it's a county thing within the MPO and ODOT. So most of those large, and I mean, that's where the large decisions have been with MPO, not necessarily about, you know, funding the electric bike program or things like that, but.
I like the way that you explain how that is essentially pre-processed before it comes.
Yeah,
to-
most of the complex thing. That doesn't mean there couldn't be something in the future here that would only require MPO, but most often they're
That's right.
through the county commission first or city council, whoever's the authority.
Are there any other implications for these amendments that you want to focus on, or would it be okay if we proceeded? Okay,
So we're gonna keep majority?
I think it sounds like we landed on simple majority with,
Yeah.
we'll be visiting quorum in a.
Yeah,
in a
just in
minute.
just a few minutes. There's nothing else on page 2.
Well, I just was curious, is this the paragraph G there, is that the right title and phrasing for all this, Bob? Just so that we don't have a problem later with, oh, there's nobody called the transportation director. I'm just making sure.
Yeah, or it works.
Okay. I mean,
Keep scrolling then. Page 3, there's the upper, there's nothing on the upper half of of significance. It's minor changes, just clarifying appointments of alternates and term date or term finish dates for members. I think that's fairly straightforward, benign kind of language. And I would just direct you towards the bottom of, under the officers section, items 7 and 8. We have discussed this in the past about my role, or, you know, the MPO manager role, taking direction from the policy board and having responsibilities set forth by these bylaws. And then we had talked in the past about, we had some specific language proposed in the past about the MPO manager being able to sign certain contracts. We had specific information listed there. Instead of putting that into the laws, we kept it generic essentially and said, I felt better that we could come back and have a separate discussion about that and have maybe adopt a resolution or some, or policy that, you know, clarifies that if there's a funding amount, you know, something like that, that we would do that separately and not enshrine them in the bylaws.
So maybe just say certain contracts and agreements as specified by resolution or something, or.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
Can I just offer one thing here on the officers too? And, you know, it's been an informal thing where the ODOT representative, you know, will always defer and say no chair, vice chair. It has to be an elected official. This is common with the act, with this one. And I would do the same as the CET rep, but it's not written in that it has to be. And I don't know if it has to be, because certainly Omar and I don't want to, you know, it needs to be an elected official because to represent in our case. But if you want to put it in there saying it has to come from either the city or county representatives for chair, then and make it formal, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd agree with that point. To Bob's point, that's what we already do on the acts. We ensure that
And is that in the bylaws?
I don't think so. I think
It is in the act.
It is.
The executive committee and the chair can only be one of the elected. And it used to just say it had to be one of the 3 counties. Now I think it allows for the city rep to be.
So it would be like section N. I guess it could potentially be just another line after N1. It could be chair and vice chair must be or shall be
elected members of the policy board,
elected members of the policy board.
something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Or publicly elected.
Right. I like that you specify of the policy board, not just like some random other
Random
elected.
elected.
You're gonna be the chair now. Technically, it's allowed. Okay. Thanks for that, Bob. Did
We're
you?
gonna add a new paragraph, number 2, that says that the vice chair and chair have to be elected officials.
Yes,
Correct.
yeah, we can add that. It'll just be a simple sentence.
Elected officials who are members of the MPO policy board.
And then, so there's that language in about MPO manager, and then I think item 8 on there as well, the policy board shall have the opportunity to provide input on the manager's annual performance evaluation. And that language, I have a message into the city of Bend's HR person to make sure that we can include this language in here, but I would think that we can make a role or make that ability for the policy board to have engagement in that review process.
I mean, it's a little bit strange because it's for council, when we evaluate the city manager's performance, we do it in executive session. But we don't have that here, so.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we have to have that here, just because that's allowed under law, isn't it? It's a personnel issue, so can't you talk personnel issues in executive session?
Yeah, we just have to create one because we don't have one existing otherwise.
Yeah.
So it would be,
Right.
I mean, we're not making any decisions anyway, but I did think it was appropriate to at least have input.
Right.
Thoughts on whether we have that input in an executive session or in an open meeting?
It makes sense to do it in an executive session.
I tend to agree. I think an executive session would allow for a more frank discussion of any potential issues that would then, any action would still be taken. I mean, the input would be made in a public meeting.
Yeah, I guess my point is I agree with you. It should be an executive session. I'm just not sure it's required to be in the bylaws, because if that's what Oregon public meeting law already allows us to do with personnel matters, I don't know why I have to restate it here. Whatever you need to do, I mean, ask the attorneys what needs to go in here.
Okay.
Get the right language.
Okay. Page 4, getting into the big question here. There's the only thing of significance is that quorum question. Do we want to does a quorum to hold a meeting? Is it 3 of 5 members or 4 of 5 voting members?
Well, 4 or 5 gets at this issue about the city not being able to block anything. Well, because in theory, if you just had 3 of 5, then and you had 2 city reps, the 2 city reps could block. But it would give them that super majority power. So
I tend to think 4 of the 5 is a pretty high bar. Maybe we think it's appropriate. I mean, if you look at the history of the US Constitution, it probably we wouldn't have convened a meeting if we had abided by the requirements set forth in the Articles of Confederation. So it's.
Would say what?
The Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia changed its mandate from amending the Articles of Confederation to saying, let's create an entirely new constitution to replace the Articles of Confederation. So it was convened under different pretenses, and there was so much disagreement that some members left the convention, and it ended up being signed by the unanimous consent of all of those present. But some delegations were so upset that they had already left. So I don't know. I feel sensitive, I guess, in terms of being able to deny quorum if 2 members left, this body wouldn't be able to make any decisions. I tend to think that's, I don't know. I would say quorum could be 3, but I'm open to leaving it as 4 as it is now.
I mean, looking to something that's a little bit closer and a little bit more recent. Denial of quorum in Salem in the last couple of years has been a great handicap in getting the business of the state done. So
So that would suggest 3 would be sufficient.
I think, I mean, all our motives, it depends on who's in the room are good, but since there's so much language on a designee, right? Making it 3 is fine because I can appoint anybody, you can appoint anybody, Omar can appoint anybody. So even if we're, out of country, we can make sure we have a representative there, and to ensure. So, keeping it so that someone can't personally block it, or not that that would ever happen, necessarily, but that seems appropriate to me because we can assign someone for ourselves.
3 seems appropriate.
Yeah.
yeah.
Councilor Riley, any thoughts?
I think you're right on that, Bob, and the experience I've had so far is that some members who are here as designees are uncomfortable voting on things because they're not the elected official and they've chosen to abstain. So it's been this kind of awkward thing on the more controversial stuff. I think we're going to run into that. You'd run into that problem too. Or people like, yeah, they sent me here, but I think I'd rather have Councilor Riley or Commissioner Chang vote on this, not me.
Yeah.
Hey, why not me?
So, and I guess the point
You're always going to be.
the point of the 4 or 5 is like we have to work to figure this stuff out together. I mean, I'm not.
And just as a reminder, I mean, the rules say if it was 3 as quorum, unanimous consent of those 3 would be required to take
Right.
it.
They'll have to get 3.
Yeah.
Still have to get all 3, yeah. So you still have to get the city +1 to make a decision. Okay, that's fine then. So have the quorum rule be this, but you still get the.
I mean, it does suggest if the city withheld both of its representatives, action would be taken by the county, ODOT, and CET. But that assumes, I mean, it's hard to imagine a scenario where they wouldn't have alignment on something. It seems like it would probably be a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing 3 of 5 is sufficient for quorum. Is there any objection to that? 3. Okay. Then let's make that edit. Tyler?
Okay, will do.
The only other thing I always wonder, we had this in the TAC bylaws for Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order, conducting meetings in accordance with the most current version of Robert's Rules. I feel like if we say accordance with, that's sort of like in the spirit of, because we're definitely not conducting meetings in accordance with the most current version of Robert's Rules of Order. But as long as, I guess it depends on what we mean by in accordance with. Just like those movies that are like inspired by a true story. Well, Robert's Rules of Orders are pretty burdensome. So I don't know if we want to say a simplified version or whether we just think, in accordance with is sufficient. It's not, textually completely accurate, but.
So no filibusters is what.
You don't mean a parliamentarian.
How does county commission or council,
Yeah.
do they follow?
I don't know what the city charter says.
I mean,
That would be our guiding document.
I mean, because
We have legal counsel basically ensuring that we're following public meeting laws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actively. So you know,
Yeah, I mean-
I would hate to add something to these bylaws requiring the MPO to retain legal counsel to come
Right,
sit with us at every meeting.
Well, I
Right.
feel like we can abide by the public meeting laws of Oregon without necessarily following the procedures required by Robert's Rules of Order.
Right.
That's my concern. It's just Robert's Rules of Order is an additionally high bar that is not legally required. That seems like we're asking, if anyone said you're not following Robert's Rules of Order, I don't know that we would say we are. I don't think we are either. But it's not like a legal counsel issue.
Right.
It's more of a procedural
Yeah.
style issue.
Tyler, was that always in our bylaw?
It is, it's an old,
Right, yeah.
it was here when I. The day were. I mean, I had intended to, had to do a little bit of research to see what others had done and just didn't get a chance to do that. Cause I'm wondering now if we could just simply remove that reference. And to say that
Yeah.
we'll do them when we meet Oregon's public meeting.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where I'm.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, you can have a charter or bylaws or things like that that are kind of very formal, and then you can have kind of operating principles
Mhm. Yeah.
that are separate from that, where you can talk about that stuff.
Like we aspire to do this.
Yeah.
So the city charter says, the council shall by ordinance prescribe rules to govern its meetings and proceedings. So the charter doesn't say Robert's Rules of Order. It just says we should prescribe rules for governing our meetings and proceedings. That sounds pretty sensible.
We could
Right.
do, and we could come back at some point in the next couple of months with a set of draft rules. The board to consider.
Okay.
Required clown noses for all policy board members each meeting.
Elected, so.
Wait a minute.
I'm not wearing the nose without the full wig.
Okay, thank you for that.
Right. Can we keep moving?
Yeah, I think page 5.
Yeah, page 5, nothing significant here. The only thing we put in the highlighted under K, that's where I put in. We've not had any policy around allowing non-board members to speak during meetings. Just put that sentence in there saying that the chair, at the discretion of the chair, members may be allowed to speak during the meeting.
I invited Bob to speak.
Page 6.
You only get that a couple more times if you go be in then.
The only thing on page 6 is towards the very bottom, items H, I. We put in there, this is a discussion item. This was something we talked about but didn't finalize. I think in our last time we had discussed the bylaws was allowing members of the TAC to participate as ex officio members during policy board meetings. And then also having the chair directing the TAC topics to the policy board as requested. Fairly benign, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if we're allowing members of the public, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't want to also allow PAC members. That sounds fine.
Budget committee on page,
Actually, I have a question here. Are you on to I'm up a question on page 6. Are you moving on to a different page?
no,
What were you thinking?
So, paragraph B on page 6, I don't really understand this. As future transportation providers form, they shall be added to the TAC. I mean, are we talking about like district, or what does future transportation providers mean? And it says they shall be added to the TAC. So then it's like, who adds them? When does it happen? And then there's no language parallel to any of this in the TAC bylaws.
yeah,
May or may not be needed, but I was like, huh, are you talking about like a new private bus service? What are you talking about here?
yeah, I think the history on this goes back to the idea that if I recall correctly, at some point CET could become a transportation district or transportation, whatever the other, there's two different special district allowances under state statute for public transit providers. And I think the intention back when these were drafted was that I think everyone assumed CET would be its own special district at some point in the future, and that they would be mandated then to be added to the board. When I was reviewing these, I was wondering, I had kind of had the same thought, Counselor Riley, as to whether we even need this paragraph anymore.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking when I was looking at it.
Yeah.
I don't know that now that CET will have a seat.
My understanding, Counselor Riley, is also that every other MPO, and Tyler, let me know if this is incorrect, but every other Oregon MPO that governs a transit district has a transit representative as a policy board member. So
Right.
that was part of the motivation for adding Cascade East Transit. And I think this language was probably kind of a holdover from before we had taken action on including Cascade East Transit as a transit provider.
Yeah, so I mean, my inclination would be just to get rid of the whole paragraph, or if we're going to leave it in, we need to somehow make it clear that we're talking about like a publicly designated transit district, which that language is proposed to be struck from the current draft. So I just, again, like, it doesn't seem even necessary, this whole paragraph anymore.
So proposal to,
I have a question. So would this
Just
paragraph
delete it.
better serve to be in the TAC bylaws and not the?
Well, we already have representative from the transit district on the MPO policy board now, or that will be happening officially soon, right? And
Right.
so I don't know why this paragraph's needed at all. And I don't know that it even needs to then need to worry about the TAC bylaws relative to this, if this is deleted.
You can already add any members to the TAC because you're controlling the TAC bylaws. Yeah, I don't think it's needed.
yeah, I agree. It sounds like we can eliminate that paragraph. So any objections to eliminating Article 6, paragraph B? Okay. Page 7.
Page 7 covers the budget committee. A lot of color here, but most of it's fairly benign. It's changes. It's talking about appointments and appointments and reappointments to the budget committee. The only thing I would draw your attention to is item 6 on that list. We had, and this goes back, there's some history with this as well. I think we had the community members, we have 2 community members or residents that serve on the technical advisory committee. And when we added that language to the TAC bylaws 10 years ago, we allowed community members to reside outside the MPO boundary if they were going to be directly impacted by policies or projects in the MPO. And the history of that was the North Corridor project. And we had one of our community members that was served on the TAC for a very long time, Toby Bayard, or it was Michelle. Actually, Michelle Bayard served on the MPO TAC. He's technically outside the MPO boundary, but he had a heavy interest in that project, but in just MPO business in general. So we could change that. So we included that same language here in these draft revisions for the budget committee. And would like to get clarification from the board on whether you prefer them to be only within the MPO boundary or have that more flexible language.
I mean, that specific example makes me think that they should actually be within the MPO boundary or a potential MPO boundary, right? Because to say that you're impacted by projects planned within, I mean, what is the bar for that?
Yeah.
It's really vague.
But I think it just gives the policy board the flexibility to consider a member with there's preference in here for should reside within the boundary. but gives the policy board the flexibility to consider an extenuating case where maybe there is a case. I don't know that we would want to limit ourselves if there was an individual who we thought would be appropriate for other reasons, but wouldn't qualify because the bylaw, the budget committee's section says must be a resident within the boundary.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of a more negative outcome. You know, like what Tyler was maybe describing, someone who's not really directly impacted, but advocating for maybe some sort of NIMBYism within the MPO. And so that's, you know, I guess there's two sides to the coin.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is for residents already inside the boundary. I mean, I think it's, you know, you might you might clarify this a little bit by saying, changing it to 2 sentences, community members should reside within the Bend MPO boundary, period. The policy or the policy board may, at its discretion, appoint members who reside outside the boundary if. It just kind of makes it a little stronger, I think. I think there's a strong preference. But
that would work for me. I mean, I do, you know, the Bayards at this point, they could probably literally throw a rock from their property to the MPO boundary, right? And you know, so they're certainly I mean, they are absolutely stakeholders in transport decision making and you know, we're already in a place where we don't cut it off at the city at city limits. You know, there's people in Tumalo, there's people in Deschutes River Woods. So I like the idea of I do think it's appropriate to hold space or hold room for people who live very close to the MPO area to have input and influence.
Yeah, I guess the question is whether, you would want that input in order to pass or approve the budget, as opposed to, say, some more narrow action that would be justified by a direct impact. But I'm fine with what Councilor Riley proposed, I think, because the discretion is there, and presumably there would be a case-by-case conversation.
Or if you wanted something very clear and objective, you could buffer the MPO boundary area by like a half a mile or something. Just
must live within a
cut them off
5 miles.
Cut them off. Cut them off at a half a mile outside or something like that.
Yeah, I think for the sake of simplicity, I can get behind Councilor Riley's comment. Although the engineer in me wants to go with the buffer. You're an objective.
Black and white.
Another map.
Yeah. Yes. No, the hash line.
We have a budget committee boundary map.
All right, that's all on that.
Maybe our overall MPO boundary should have a sphere of influence buffer.
Okay, last page.
Yeah, and last page, there's nothing, the only thing I would want to ask clarification on, it's not highlighted, but under Article 9 amendments, paragraph E, we have language in there saying that amendments to the policy board bylaw shall be approved by a unanimous vote of the policy board. Do we want to maintain that unanimous vote language, or do you want to modify that in some way?
Going to supermajority, but I mean, unanimous isn't bad either.
Keeping unanimous, you said?
I could go either way, unanimous or supermajority. Simple majority is too few.
Yeah,
That's right. I agree.
Sorry, what was that, Councilor Riley?
I agree. I mean, I think I would probably do the 4/5.
Okay.
4 out of 5.
Yeah, that sounds good.
In case you need to vote somebody off the island.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want a high bar there. Okay. But that's good.
Yeah, I mean, 4/5 is a pretty high bar.
Sufficiently.
It means that only one person needs to be voted off the island.
Mhm.
There's also the IGA qualifier too, right? So
Yes.
So are we comfortable approving these bylaws as amended, or do we need to come back with additional language?
What we need to do is the amendment process, the IG or the bylaws say that the member entities all have there's a 30-day review period. And so what we're looking for today is directing us, we can make these changes. I don't know if you want us to see them again. Hopefully, I think we got enough. I think we can make those clarifications and changes, and we can initiate that 30-day review process and then come back next month for you to adopt them.
The Roberts rules thing, we just tossed that, right? We didn't say we have to go just ask legal counsel and get a.
No.
The suggestion would be to just have it be our own governing rules.
Yeah.
That we could then talk about at a later date. That sounds sufficient?
Yes.
Does anyone else object to approving these as amended and directing staff to initiating the member review process? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Sorry, the draft motion there.
I move approval of the bylaws as amended, and directing staff to initiate the member input process.
second.
Okay, a motion has been made by Councilor Riley and seconded by Mr. Ahmed. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, we are behind schedule here, hoping maybe we can make up a little bit of time. Item 6 is Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Kelly?
So I'll go pretty quick through this. It's your last month. It's just a reminder that this is our short-term listing that we're referring to with the MTIP. So next slide, we'll skip on to that. There's just one proposed amendment and it has a few components to it. So it is not currently in the MPO's MTIP. So part of this amendment would involve adding it. And this is because of updated project locations. And one of those locations is within the Bend MPO area. It's basically in this area that we're at in the ODOT facility. So in addition to adding the project, there's a proposed increase to funding for the preliminary engineering phase and to the construction phase. So the new project total be just under 2.6 million, and that's federal and state funding. And that funding is coming from a carbon reduction program for small urban and rural areas. So this was, next slide, sorry. This was noticed as usual, and there was a 21-day public comment period that opened on April 24th. We didn't receive any comments, so I just welcome the questions that you might have. Otherwise,
does doing this obligate us in any way if we get to a point where this carbon reduction money doesn't actually move from the federal government, or is it already moved somewhere and we know we have full access to it?
I can answer that. Yeah, so we already have full access to this. This is state directed or governor directed action to electrify our maintenance fleet within ODOT, and that's what this project is serving. The funds are all there.
From the feds?
Correct. And state dollars.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I mean, I guess one question I would ask is, can you give us some examples of where the locations of charging stations are?
Yeah, so they'll all be on ODOT facilities to serve ODOT maintenance fleet. And so the locations, I'm reading off our executive briefing here, are in LeGrand, Ontario, Lakeview, here in Bend, Astoria, Corvallis, and Roseburg.
Right, and so where in Bend, like here,
Like literally
Okay.
just back in our back lot.
and just here in Bend, not
Correct.
like other.
Yeah, so this is one of the first ones to go through. We packaged all these locations to make it a better carrot for, bid later. And we have one of our top PMs working on it here. We just tend to go first on these things, and Region 4 ends up being the experiment, right? So, I mean, this would be the first instance of actually building this out outside of like small grants here or there.
I had the opportunity to use one of these charging stations personally on a trip made to purchase a new electric car. Our old electric car didn't have the range, but stopping was great because it was not that long of a stop, but I really wish that there was amenities nearby, places to eat or use the restroom, and that was an important consideration for these, depending on the use scenario, of course.
What I should clarify that
This one is just for ODOT fleet.
correct. This is for our maintenance folks only.
Gotcha,
These won't be
gotcha.
publicly
Thank you.
accessible. I think the program you're describing falls under our NEVI
Yep. Gotcha.
system. Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I move approval of the proposed amendment to the 2024 to 2027 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program as presented.
Is there a second?
Can I just ask, so sitting on the Oregon Transportation Commission, which oversees ODOT, is there any kind of perceived conflict of interest or bias connected to a vote like this where I should be recusing myself? Or is that really far enough removed that?
Well, I mean, I'm not aware, I haven't heard a discussion from a legal perspective ever about conflicts of interest when we're voting, in terms of the conflicts that arise from other positions you hold relative to your elected role, like you're serving on OTC, or the conflicts of interest stuff that at least I've explored and had to declare conflicts on have to do with personal gain. And so I don't really know how conflicts of interest show up here from a legal perspective. I mean, I get like, well, I have this other hat I wear that informs my thinking on this, but that seems like it's not a conflict. But I could be completely wrong about that. I'm just not aware of those issues.
Yeah, I mean, literally just the other day at the Oregon Transportation Commission, the STIF funding for public transit. We were approving the list of STIF awardees, and since we don't have a transit district, we have CET. STIF money flows through counties. So
Right.
As county commissioner for Deschutes County, I had to recuse myself on the OTC's votes on the STIF.
On council's advice?
Legal counsel in this?
But yeah,
I-
in that case, Deschutes County was getting direct funds from the vote, so.
Right.
it-
In my case, I feel like I need to recuse myself from this.
Right.
I understand. I'm just a bit, the question is that because legal counsel told you had to do that, or because you just decided to do it because it made you uncomfortable? I'm sorry to be so direct.
No, the state director, the chair of the Oregon Transportation Commission, Julie Brown, she's the director of Rogue Valley Transit. So she said she had to recuse herself because Rogue Valley Transit was on the recipient list for these funds that we were approving transfer of funds to these recipients, and Deschutes County was on the list as well. But I think, maybe Omar's right. He's the one who has to recuse himself on this one.
Yeah, and I don't think I agree with Counselor Riley. There's not absolutes on that. And even that one is a practice that they've done, but every single thing that a transportation commissioner votes on, it's money coming to the area, it's money coming.
Don't get it.
Yeah, it's always one of those like, hey, better safe than sorry, but I don't think it meets the legal requirement because we have them here. Everything we vote on either goes to the city, county,
Right.
or transit, right? And we can't. What's weird on the ODOT side, and I recuse sometimes when I was in Omar's role because I'm signing the approval at some point the next week. And so it seemed kind of arbitrary to get double approve it, like I had that much authority or something, but I don't think legally I mean, I've been really throwing the conflict of interest for me lately and other things in the past here. And I honestly don't think any of them are actual by the rule, more of just a professional courtesy.
Right. And so for me personally, I'll turn around. Emerald's going to sign it and I'm going to sign the CMR. So it's like, I don't need to be voting on that.
I mean, it seems to me that the OTC ought to break the resolutions up and just say we're going to vote on everything except Deschutes County. But then everybody, I don't know, it's just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, you could never.
It's like a black hole that never ends, then leads nowhere.
Okay. Well, and the ODOT director, he did say, there's perception that he didn't say there is a conflict. He said, to avoid any perception of conflicts, you could recuse yourself. So I think after talking that, thank you for indulging me. After talking that through, I think I'm comfortable with this one. And
I would check in with a legal counsel, not those two, and see what they have to say. And then, like, well,
You're
whatever.
comfortable seconding it, you're certainly welcome to abstain also.
Yeah.
And I could second it too. I don't think that there's any rules about the chair. I think it's also more courtesy.
would we still have if we're already down one vote, there's only 3 total votes, right?
Right now, yes.
True.
Yeah.
I'm good with this. So I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion that's been made by Councilor Riley and seconded by Commissioner Chang. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Standing.
Okay, the motion passes with the abstention of Mr. Ahmed. Item 7, and let me just ask, is everyone okay staying a little bit longer until say 1:45? Maybe that way we can get through the rest of these. Okay. Item 7 is Cascades Transit update. Bob Townsend.
So I want to be respectful of time here too, but also respectful of the process if you have questions. So next week I'm at Deschutes County Commission, not giving the exact same, but most of the same. And you actually get a little more because I haven't been to the commission yet. And then the following week or 2 weeks, I'm at Bend City Council where since I've met with you a couple times, your presentation is a little bit different, but the context is relatively the same. So I'm going to go relatively quickly, but also feel free to stop me and ask questions if you need to. And I don't mean to fast track it, but certainly you'll have a lot of opportunity over the next month, everyone except Omar, to weigh in. Next slide, Ben. So I'm just going to go over initiatives. Fairs are a big thing, the legislative update, because we have quite a few questions and future of CET and Bend. And so for the county presentation next week, you're getting a lot of the same thing. For the city, since we've already done it, we're mostly talking about legislative and future of CET. So just, this is important to me because you can never get the word out as much as you used to because people don't listen to the radio and other things. But MPO awarded us funds, before for bus stop improvements, or I think in 23 actually is when they probably went through. And so we're finally making those. We have all the schedule holders are being updated the last couple of weeks, then signs come in and benches in another few weeks, and then the shelters in June. And so the anticipation is hopefully there's going to be a few shelters that take more ADA work that we're working through the city of Bend permitting. and, you know, may not be done till the end of the year, but the cycle and with the GO bond is our intent is to, you know, update all the base stuff on every stop within Bend, you know, almost 300 of them. But then on the shelter side, you know, do about 15 a year for the next 5 years. You know, not every stop is going to get a shelter, but that way we'll tackle them. But so you should be seeing our people out and doing some of those improvements now, and, you know, through August. The big one for us here in the city of Bend is the extended hours begin on Monday, June 2nd, and we go from 6 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. with the caveat too, at 6 a.m., even on normal 45-minute routes, everything is 30 minutes until about 9 or 10 in the day when traffic is just too much for us to use the same number of drivers to get to. But so the examples I give, and everyone's like, oh gosh, that's 30 minutes and then 30 minutes, you know, it's not like everybody's trip is an hour. The two examples I went over this morning at the ITE conference were both 16-minute ones, and they had to ride 2 buses. It's just, you know, if you're one of the last ones on a route and then the first one's off, you know, you really have to look at it. But this will be a big thing for us. And with that week too is a tri-transit week, and as elected officials here and Omar as a transportation you'll all get an email Wednesday or Thursday. We're doing this other challenge, trying to challenge elected officials and transportation related people to just ride it one time that week, or schedule a meeting to ride it too, or things like that. So you'll be getting that, but we're doing a lot of promotional events all week. We'll have booths at Hawthorne, will be in Redmond and stuff, and different things. Quite the schedule that week, and I'll send you the flyer on that. It's posted on our website and Instagram now.
Which week is Tri-Transit Week?
June 2nd through 8th. That same week we're expanding. Other big things is this transit pass introduction that a lot of you have heard about. That's going to soft start in July with an implementation in September. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Another big updates, and July 14th may not be the specific date. It's certainly the date for Route 8 in Northeast Bend, starting the airport route, and we're still reviewing into Deschutes River Woods potential, maybe actually earlier than later, but those are a couple other proposed expansions. Like I said, transit pass requirement in September right before fairs. Now those may change a little bit because our COIC board has to approve the final fare stuff, but everything's moving towards October implementation. Next slide.
So
Okay.
the Route 8 and potentially Airport Direct, that's also going to October, you said?
No,
Okay.
that's July. Right now, Route 8 is for sure July 14th. We think the airport route actually is going to be June 20th. We think we can get to it earlier based on bus and driver availability, but I don't want to promise anything on that one yet.
Is that stopping in downtown Redmond?
No, this one will just be because the bus already goes from Redmond to Bend. So this will be like 4 a.m. It'll start when most of the trips are between working with the airport 5:30 a.m. and 10 going outbound from Redmond. And so that it'll just be a pilot route to start with. And so we'll see how that works and the usage of it. The problem with it is we don't have a parking facility agreement yet. So like my example, instead of my wife having to drive me to Redmond, now she just has to drive me to Hawthorne, but it's not like I can park there overnight yet.
Still,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah. So next slide. So here's our draft fares, and the COIC board has not approved them because there's a big public process to how they get posted on our website. Actually, I think they posted today, but officially next week. We have 45-day public comment periods. We have to have a public hearing. That'll all be done in August. But since we haven't had fares for a while, we wanted the board's soft approval that this is a good place to start from to get feedback on. So you'll start to see this everywhere. We're not doing all the different types of fares like we had before where there were 6 different fares. It's just, certainly there's 6 different fares up here, but rec routes are their own thing. They have different approval process, but the top of it is basically it's $2 a ride, $4 for Bend or for dial rides, because usually that's double, or it's allowed by federal law to be double of your others. max daily rate of 3 trips. You know, we have monthly and annual pass there. Not very many people use them, but some businesses and other entities. And so these are full fares. And then the Bend Redmond Airport route, you know, that's a $15 proposed, but the process is we'll get tons of feedback. We'll meet with the board in August and then they'll vote. If the feedback is these are too high, too low, they have opportunities to change them. The rec routes are a little bit different. We have our board approve them, but they're based on us not being able to spend a single tax dollar on those routes. And so they have to be adjusted all the time. And then the main thing is we're not going to get a lot of feedback on the fares. You know, some people are like, oh, why do it? It's too expensive or whatever. But these are really reasonable. What we're going to get feedback on is the next slide is who gets reduced ones, and reduce is 50%. So instead of $2, it's $1. And like I tell everyone, fares are not about money. They're not about money, but let's just say as we ramp up our services over the next year and we can get to $1 million in fare revenue over all of Central Oregon, our budget is still 30 million, right? It's not everything, but what it helps with is certainly $1 million is 6 new routes, you know, or pays for 6 or 7 routes, depending on what the route is. And it also controls people taking advantage of the system, which is happening right now. Like with Dial-A-Ride being free, we're seeing some people schedule 60 trips a month versus once they have to pay something, they'll be like, okay, I'm going to go grocery, doctor, and out to dinner. In Redmond, where it's free to everyone, we're taking elementary kids to school now. That's not, you know, and it's no one's fault. That's what the system is, but certainly that's not going to happen as much with that. And so if you come to me with someone like, hey, I wish this group was free or something, I'll have the conversation, right? If it's and that's why, or next slide too.
Saying the Dial-A-Ride is
being abused.
Elementary school.
It's free to everyone right now. And in both spaces, in Bend, you have to qualify with an ADA age or something. In Redmond, you don't. And so it's just being, but once you put and even here in Bend where you have to qualify, someone is like, hey, I want to go to breakfast, then pick me up, take me home. I want to go to lunch because it's all free versus, you know, they'll probably be a little more deliberate in their trips that way. And we'll get it to the people who need it. And then there's these group fare reductions. And so if there's an entity you're thinking about or a business, this is pretty loose, but you can see employers, anybody with 10, you know, we don't want to do it for 3 people and have to sign an agreement or something like that. But it's really giving 20 people a reduced rate. It's more about getting users, getting them off the system than making $1. But at the same time, it allows us to have a tracking method. If there are safety concerns, we can pull that people. Now, Mike had brought to my attention, and I met with Catalina a few weeks ago, Mike, on, you know, LCA or Latin Community Association is one, right, with, you know, just the nature of things and giving ID. You know, we're going to work out agreements with a couple entities. Shepherd's House may be another one that does this, where they manage the people. We never know who they are. But if we have a problem with pass number 10528 and they're disruptive on a bus, we know it went to LCA. We tell LCA about it, and Catalina will take care of it from a safety concern. So we still have that thing, but we don't have any of their information. And just back on this one, if you want to just sign up and pay, you just need a phone, you just need a phone number or something. We don't need a name or anything. If you want a reduced rate, you have to turn in ID. You have to have a driver's license that shows age. You have to have a school ID. And so the caveat is, you know, anybody could sign up and we'd never have any information, but they're paying full fare. But if they want the reduction, then we have to work another way. And so if you have any specific questions or does someone qualify, the answer is yes, I'll write it in there. The actual fare guidelines has some other at the discretion of the transit director. And so again, it's not to make every dollar we can, it's to make these, you know, groups feel welcome and use the bus. Next slide. So legislatively, and some of you have seen this, Commissioner Chang voted on it, I think a month ago, to sign a letter, but this QE stuff comes up all the time. And so I've just been given a quick overview. The black and white language there is what exists in the law. The yellow is what we want added. Now, if it would have been added like it was there, saying counties and or federally recognized tribes can designate the public transportation service provider as the designated QE, will be fine. more than likely, it won't be added like that. It'll be, added in another bill, just saying, hey, the definition is broad. Why we're pushing for this one is we think it saves about 10% off the top, just in administration fees, from like money goes to Jefferson, Deschutes, Crook County. They have to administer it to us. Then we have audit rules we have to follow. Then they have audit rules they have to follow. And it's adding a lot of layers. And so I just want to be clear, that's the language we want, and we're proposing. Next slide. And so we went through a few different ways. We're working with ODOT Stiff Rules Advisory Committee because they set some rules that have made it harder to administer. And so if we can just change some of those from administrative perspective, they can't make us a QE, but we can reduce some of the oversight. It can say stuff like, they have audit requirements. They can minimize those if two entities are doing it, for example. We thought House Bill 2795 was going to move forward, and this is where Deschutes County and Jefferson County and a couple other entities had provided us letters supporting a language change to that, but that's not going to move forward. And so 2 weeks ago, we went to, hey, let's just do a more generic letter where we're wanting to change the definition of QE, and that's been presented to the Transportation Committee, and it's going to be proposed as an amendment. Now, if the transportation bill doesn't move, we still could assign it to another bill. It's pretty complicated. So that's where that's at.
So right now, you are hoping this will be an add-on to the transportation package.
Yeah, I mean, that would be easy. It's a transportation bill, but if that stops moving, then it could be added to, any bill. It's one sentence. And the nice thing about this is you look at, it's awkward. No one will oppose this because it has Deschutes County, it's still within their control. It just says they may do it. So it's within the county. The only people who would oppose it is like Wilsonville's transit district or something where they actually want it to go farther, but this still gives, they want it to be an absolute, where the thing is like, hey, if we're doing good and each county wants to designate it, then that's great. If we're not doing well enough and they want to keep the oversight, then that's welcome too, but at least it gives us the choice. The next slide then is just, again, same way, Omar has to act here is I'm not a lobbyist. I'm a staff member for CET. And unless the board directs us to lobby things, when people ask me about legislation, I only can tell them the impacts of it, right? And so, the OTA is proposing an increase in the payroll tax from 0.1% to 0.5 over the next 8 years. If something like that were passed, it would allow us to go from 30 minutes in Bend to every 15 minutes in Bend. It would allow us to double up our community connector routes, and it would also allow us to expand a couple routes. And that's even with including significant inflation, because technically, although point percentages don't seem like much, that would be 5 times the amount of money that we have right now running our system. There's some other nuances because some of that money goes to discretionary things and like that, but that would be the impact of that. The initial transportation package, and this is the actual package, it's Democratic proposed, but the one that has, some draft language, unlike the Republicans ones, which is just a press release, but it's proposing an increase from 0.1 to 0.18. So not quite double. What that would do is that would, account for a lot of the recent inflation. It would allow us to do the expansions we're doing this June and July, but there would be nothing beyond that. That would just, whatever we're operating by September is what we'd be operating the next handful of years. And if inflation continues, then at some point in 2028, we would probably have to reduce service if there's not another or an addition to the payroll tax. But for these reasons, and then to this last one, or go ahead.
I mean, just before we leave transportation package discussion, I can be as opinionated as I want and expressive that I want everyone to be aware that the House Republican caucus has proposed an alternative package that zeroes out this transfer of payroll tax funds to public transit, zeroes it. And it doesn't say, hey, we created this payroll tax to fund public transit, so we're gonna zero out public transit and we'll make the payroll tax go away. It uses that payroll, transfers that payroll tax to operation and maintenance of, basic road operations and maintenance. So which I personally find outrageous. And that is where a substantial amount of the $700 million of purported savings in the House Republican legislative package comes from. You heard from Bob how charging fares might generate $1 million of revenue for a $30 million program. I'd like to ask Bob, from the STIF, how much of your $30 million comes from the STIF?
Yeah, I mean, that's a misleading number that I use, or the 30 million when I want to. The thing about the 30 million is we've gotten tons of federal grants, like our operating budget, unless we, like we got federal grants for new buses, which we need. But if you just told me I just had STIF and some of our federal programming dollars, we'd be in the 14 to 17 million dollar range. So $1 million out of that is more substantial.
Right.
But we've been pretty fortunate in grants. And that's why even on the next slide, you'll see is there's so many variables right now from the Republican thing, which would just crush us within a year and a half, to, if the Democrat bill passes or if it gets adjusted to what our federal dollar is going to do. It's a tough time for us to know or to predict.
Right. And I'm not dwelling on this House Republican framework because I think it actually has any legs and is going to go anywhere. But it is, politically, it is the main reason why the basic transportation package that, the one that includes the 0.1 to 0.18 is high centered right now. So, I mean, as long as you can propose something absurd that's, not real. I heard it from Werner Rischke this morning. We had our legislative meeting with, all the legislators that represent even just little portions of Deschutes County. And he said, well, I'm supporting the House Republican transportation package. So that's why I'm not interested in the, in the majority package that's on the table. So just, I'm sharing this with my elected official colleagues from the city of Bend, as an encouragement to, for the city to weigh in on the transportation package discussion. I'm sure you guys are involved and LOC is involved, but, just.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I mean, I think they were hoping that they were going to get some Republican support for the package, right? And so that's especially if there's any Democratic members that are not going to support it. So that's why it's hung up, I'm assuming.
And there very well may be a few from the Senate side.
There's two, I would say, I know that I'd read this morning that Representative Mannix and I can't remember his name, the representative from Hood River, both Republicans, they're working, there's a subgroup working behind closed doors right now on a package.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Helfrich
and Mannix are working with a group of Democrats on crafting a bill. They've created a new joint subcommittee to shepherd that process. So,
and from the Senate Republican side, Bruce Starr has been, he's one of the vice chairs of the Joint Committee on Transportation. So, but when I was talking to Representative Emerson Levy about this, about the bill, a few months ago, she said, given the composition of her district, it might be very challenging for her to vote for, this transportation package. So it's,
No,
there's no guarantee that all of the Democrats are going to vote for the transportation package. Though, especially those in really hard divided districts. And then, who knows how many Republicans are gonna come forward and, historically, transportation packages have been highly bipartisan things. And, I think it's, then the kind of offering up of this alternative framework by the House Republicans is a very deliberate and active effort to make this a not bipartisan transportation effort.
Thank you for that background. Bob, did you want to finish up real quick?
Yeah, this is my last slide here, and just for you and Councilor Riley, this is most of the city of Bend is this forward stuff, but this just gets to, we have asked me to predict what next year looks like or what the future of transit, and I can't. We're sitting on reserves, some COVID money still, so no matter what, we're good for 2 years, right? But we either fall off a cliff or we can continue to add service, depending on that. But this is this discussion around, the impact of fares, the impact of federal funding, that's reality that I keep trying to share, just like today, there's a lot of 15-minute thing, talk, which I would love to get to 15-minute, but the reality that means then Route 11 or some other routes getting canceled to get 15 minutes on Third Street. It's not adding both. And so those are difficult discussions. We're doing a lot of data gathering. If we can really increase ridership with getting to commuter, like, for me is now I can ride the bus to work every morning starting June 2nd because it works for my schedule versus before I didn't get to work till 8:15, which doesn't. And so hopefully we're gathering some of those people, and then it changes the formula, on fares and what percentage it's paying and how we can add routes. And the other thing is, that I've talked to a lot of people about is, we can't say Route 11, and I'm just throwing out Route 11 because I was on it this morning, so it's easy in my head. But if Route 11 doesn't have poor usage and we haven't gone door to door, met with senior center groups along it, met with businesses, talked about plans, then it's not fair for me to say it should be canceled. And so we hired an additional staff member. We're doing really specific outreach across every single route so that we can really hey, let's talk to a business even. Hey, the bus stop gets here at 7:25. Will you allow people to work at 7:30 now instead of 8? Really getting into those conversations. And then, if everything goes well and we purchase the property on the north end, we come to agreement with the hospital and south end property and we have Troy Field working, then we'll be a hub system by 27 and these, 30, 45-minute routes will go away. So it's just a lot of stuff. I wish I could be like, hey, this is what we look like next year, but it's one step at a time and we'll really know a lot more by November this year.
And that's looking at potentially replacing some of the existing routes with more north, south, east, west.
Yeah, or central, it'd more be a gridded system where there's interconnect and not everything has to go to Hawthorne. So, and then we want to be operating every 30 minutes. It'd be like, hey, the bus is just cycling and except for their breaks and lunch, right? And type of system. Right now, what happens is in the morning, it takes 20 minutes to continue or do a route. So the bus driver gets back there and just sits until the next time, right? Because in the afternoon, it's longer versus if you're on cycles or gridded, they're just going until it's their break. And so you're actually having, it's costing more in fuel and things, but you're actually able to hit more stops, meet more times. And so that's going to happen no matter what. Even if we maintain the funding, we're going to go away from a Hawthorne-centric situation, but it's the timing of that.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
With an eye on the clock, we're actually over time at this point, even with our extension. Thank you for the update. Sounds like some really promising things are
I feel good
on the horizon and potentially there. We have one other substantive item here, which is item 8, subcommittee for review of citizen member applications. I would suggest that I would be willing to review these applications, and I would be looking for one other policy board member to join me. Does anyone have interest or time for this in the next couple of weeks?
How many applications do we anticipate?
I think
9.
9 or
9.
Oh, okay.
Or from one individual, really.
Okay.
I mean, because there's dual applications. That's all it means.
Applied with their
It might just kind of.
nickname, man.
Or alias. I'm happy to support you on that.
Okay, that would be great. Then we'll touch base about setting up a time outside of this meeting. The last item before public comment is other business. Share anything, it's maybe some of these that we can skip because we really are out of time.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything we need to cover right now.
Okay. The only one that I wanted to bring up that was because it was timely is we had a bad crash on 97, a crossover crash. And there was some emails about whether or not a barrier would be appropriate in some locations on Highway 97. And I wondered whether this body might be interested in exploring that or looking at the data or having any kind of recommendation in terms of adding that to the next Parkway Plan update. That's something that might be of interest.
Where are we talking about? On 97.
Specifically
Putting up
within
a
the city
barrier.
of Bend, so not a barrier that would occlude left access or frontage road access, but places where there is no access currently, but also no barrier. And I think preliminarily there were fewer crashes than I had anticipated, but I had heard from the Bend Police Department chief that their traffic sergeants always wonder why we don't have a barrier, and this is one of their higher priority items. So I was willing to do some more outreach and talk to them to see what their concerns are. But if this board had any views or anything like that, I thought maybe that might be a future item that we would be interested in talking about.
No,
I
I
would
was gonna say,
support that.
Okay.
from ODOT's perspective, right, like, of course, we'll take a look at, any plan. Barrier on 97 is a need throughout our entire region from the Dallas to the California border. The segment through the city of Bend and MPO boundary, from a crash statistic perspective, maybe doesn't meet the same bar as, say, Lapine South or even Lapine to Sun River or near Madras. And so those are some of like kind of the hot topic segments, but we have a parkway plan and I think we have a process and an opportunity to review and revise that. Again, as Commissioner Chang just wrapped up talking about transportation budget and funding and a package, unfortunately, like all of these things are hypothetical, right? Given our funding scenario. But
Is that something that you might be interested in learning more about?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I would really like to know where in Bend we're talking about.
so last
Kind of chunk,
week, before,
but that we can cover during the discussion.
Roger that.
Any other items, Tyler?
No.
Okay.
Can I just ask one quick question? Is there any risk that the STGB funding, I mean, is there some issue with the STBG funding that we need to know about, or is it at risk?
No, you mean in terms of that bullet under staff?
Yeah.
No, we can, it's just,
So next meeting's okay.
yeah, we can talk about it next meeting. It's a very
Okay, right.
minor update. The
Great.
money's safe. We're just stepping.
We're just laundering.
Yeah, we're just laundering it to get it to CET. It's been sitting
Okay,
out
all right.
5
good.
years. We want to
Let's
get
all talk about it next time then.
they
Thank
can
you.
utilize it. So,
Okay, and our last item is public comment. James, thanks for joining us today. Do you have any comments that you'd like to share?
Just real quick regarding the fair schedule that Bob's, I know these are just in the works still. What I'd like the city council and county commissioners, when it comes to something like an annual pass, I think initially we should try to be getting as many people on the buses as we can. And I think at a $500 level, you're basically gonna, that's a car payment for a lot of people or more. I think we should consider like a $250 annual pass initially. And doing that, you're gonna get people that might ride bikes in the summertime, but then use the buses in the winter. And then in a 12 months, 18 months, review how all the inputs are coming, what the funds are. But $500, when you ask for that, that is a lot of money for what I would consider still a subpar transportation system. I just want the counselors and the county commissioner to hear that from me. I'll be glad to go into more details if need be, but I don't want to take up any more time in this meeting on that. So.
And I just would encourage you, James, to make sure that you provide that comment formally into the process to CET directly. So it's gathered as part of the public input, the same comment.
That is the plan.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And you can do that, James, next week. It may be open today, like I said, but officially next week, I know we're opening it where you can make comments, and then they'll be presented at our August board meeting to the board.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, and James, I would just also encourage you in the same public comment, if you have any input on the proposed monthly pass fee of $60, because I mean, that would be one way of getting at like, if you only want to ride the bus regularly for 5 months of the year, then that would be one other way of getting at a part of an annual pass that would work for you.
I'll have to think about that one, Bill. Okay.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Nice cartoon there. It's from the bulletin.
It's an old one, I think, from like the New Yorker or something.